Welcome back to the show, everyone. For today's guest, we have Eric Nicksick. Eric is the head coach and general manager at Xtreme Couture, about 12 minutes from here. He's been in the MMA world since 2007, just launched a podcast about a year ago, Versus Us. Coach world champions in the UFC, such as Francis Ngannou, Strickland, Aljamain Sterling, a father, a husband. From what I can tell, a really cool guy. Thanks for hopping on the show, dude.
Thanks, Steven. Thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I'm a big MMA fan, so I'm super excited for this. Yeah. You know, me and my dad watch the fights almost every Saturday.
Nice.
We try to. So your journey in MMA has been interesting because you were a part of it before it was cool.
Yeah.
You know, I think the UFC really mainstreamed it to a lot of people. From Xtreme Couture, I believe you started as the desk person, right?
No, I was member number one.
Okay, number one.
I was member number one. My first job was grappling coach.
Okay.
Randy called me up like kind of in a hurry, panic sort of situation. One of the coaches didn't show up to run a Friday practice. I happened to be there, and he's like, "Hey, can you run this practice for me?" Sure, no problem. Got good feedback on the practice, and then he said, "Hey, I think I would like for you to take over this Friday permanently if you're down." So that kind of got my foot in the door.
Nice. Were you already in the MMA world when you got that call? Because you did college football before, is that right?
Yeah, so very small training, and it was more like in the off season and stuff like that. And then while I was bartending, we had a graveyard bartender. He ran a school out off like Sunset and Sunset. It's called No Rules, and it was like a Sansu guy, but he was a John Jock Machado purple belt. So there wasn't a lot of like jiu-jitsu back in Vegas during that time, other than like John Lewis, right? And then Mark Lehman kind of broke off and did Cobra Kai. But there wasn't a lot. So started training with him, and then he was kind of like my first introduction into jiu-jitsu. And then when he closed his gym down, Randy was just about to open up his, and that's when he was getting ready for Tim Sylvia. So that was 2006. Kind of stumbled across the gym. They weren't open yet to the public. Met Mike Pyle, met Jay Heron and those guys, and like, hey, we're training at these times. If you want to come in. And little did I know at the time, it was just like basically me getting greenlit, just getting the crap kicked out of me. And I was too stupid to ever not come back. You know, I was like, I'll be back tomorrow. I'll see you guys. So that's kind of what got my foot in the door.
Talk to me a little bit, because that's super cool, right? Super grassroots introduction to the gym. And now obviously you're one of the head coaches and you run it. Talk to me about that process of going from the student to then the teacher in your MMA career.
Honestly, like when you say that word teacher, I still think I'm a student. And I don't know if that's just because of the way that I got into the game, and it was because I never really started this to become a pro fighter or to be a coach in MMA. So to me, it's still like very new and young. Like when you said in the intro, I was like, man, like almost 18 years
Crazy.
At Xtreme Couture, and I'm like, wow, I still feel like that young kid in the room just learning, you know. And I think that probably helps me a lot in this sport because, you know, to be a good coach, I think you have to remain coachable. So it keeps that kind of white belt mentality. You know, I still mop the mats. I still everything I would do back when, you know, I was a white belt walking into the gym.
Love it, dude. I think it's really important, especially coming from someone like you, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this and a lot of people in business. And I think a lot of people think once you get to a certain position, a certain rank, a certain belt, you've made it. When in reality, the second you think you got it, you actually don't. You should be always getting it. You need that coachability and teachability. Talk to me a little bit about Eric. So you've been in the coaching game for, like you said, about 17 years now, starting as a student and now evolved into a coach. You've coached multiple champions. Obviously, the MMA and the UFC is bigger than it's ever been, and you're a big face of that, especially here in Vegas, the fight capital. Talk to me about what you think separates a good coach from a great coach.
It's a great question. I think time, I think patience, I think accountability. I think that it's so important to give the proper tools to be successful, but also take responsibility when things go wrong. You know, I think we're kind of based on a society now that's a finger pointing society and a lot less of accountability.
Lots of victim.
Lots of that, right? And we see that quite a bit, especially in our sport. You know, like there's a lot of boo-hoos and why I didn't get this and why I didn't get that. And you always kind of think to yourself as a coach or even a former athlete, it's like, well, did you do everything within your power to make it possible? You know, so I think for me, like being a coach is just that care. I love each and every fighter. I'm inspired by them. I'm at a point now in my career that I want to work with people that inspire me to go. And I say there's get tos and got tos, and I want to get to be able to coach people. This is the best job in the world. So I think just for me, like that's probably my most passionate side of things, is just my sense of care.
I love it. What do you think attracts people to MMA and martial arts?
I'll tell you what, there's two sides to that coin, because it brings out the most delusional people I've ever seen, right? And then it brings out some of the best people, like as far as the athletes go, and the people that can push themselves beyond like human brink, like things that, like, I get so proud of my team after practice on Monday. I remember like stopping and just thinking to myself, like, dude, I pushed this whole group super hard. It's hot, it's getting humid out, like, it was tough rounds. And I looked around, and what I noticed was, like, everyone in there's hurting, everyone in there is tired, but each individual is kind of pushing the other one to get through this session. And every time I get done, I'm like, wow, dude, we got the best group of guys in the world. I mean, fighters, not guys, but and then you get the people that show up and just think they can just hop in and do it, right? And so there's that fine line of like delusional athletes that walk in the door and is like, oh, I can do this. And you put them through the practices, and you're like, all right, hop in, let's see if you can handle it, and usually the first one to quit or the first one that's throwing up,
It's hard, dude. I've done a couple jiu-jitsu classes. My good buddy that I grew up with, Shapiro, they run the syndicate. Yep. Yeah. And Shane, his brother, I grew up with them. So I've done some jiu-jitsu classes. Definitely humbling once you get in there.
Those guys are good, bro.
They're really good.
Yeah.
I'm doing kickboxing now. I've always loved the idea of MMA and who you become in the process of that, because I think, so I'm in the direct sales space, and it's a bunch of guys knocking doors around the country selling solar panels. Sure. And from the outside looking in, that's all it looks like, right? Sales, knocking doors. From the outside looking in with MMA, it's rolling, it's punching, it's kicking, but there's so much more that goes into it because of the evolution and the commitment, consistency, and adversity it takes to actually be good or great at something. Can you walk me through a little bit about, in your experience, of what MMA / that mixed martial arts arena can do to someone, not just on the physical, but also the mental?
It saved my life. I mean, 100% saved my life. I was in a position where I think I was, being born and raised in Vegas.
All the vices. And you fall into that, especially because my lifestyle at the time, I was bartending. I bartended for 20 years. But during that time, I found Xtreme Couture. What I started to notice was, and this was just self-accountability things. It was like, hey, you get off of work, the first thing you do is you grab a drink, you're gambling, you're hanging out, and then you piss away all your tip money, go home, and then like, what did I work for? I did nothing today. And then now you're driving home drunk or something like, I don't know, just everything to me just felt like a slippery slope. And I started to look around at my surroundings, and I'm like, wait a minute, like this person's 5 to 10 years older than me, and they're stuck in this job and they hate their lives. And I'm looking into a mirror in the future. Like, so what am I doing here? And when I found MMA, when I found Xtreme Couture, I found it was a community of people that were working together to achieve a common goal, but a higher goal. And that's really what I was attracted to the most. It was like, man, I want to be around this type of individual. Not necessarily like, oh, I want to be a world champion, I want to be a fighter, I want to be this. No, I want to be around people that are grinding and working hard and taking care of their bodies and have something to show for it. So, I mean, that was the biggest thing for me, that was finding Xtreme, because it just really altered my entire life. And I think that people that, when they really understand the core root of MMA, it's a challenge to yourself, right? Whether you're grappling against somebody, you're playing human chess, right? You're doing kickboxing, whatever it may be, but the environment that you're around, it inherently rubs off on you when you're around world champion mindset. Talk to me a little bit about culture, because obviously your guys' gym has blown up over the last really 5 years, probably, at least since I've been following the sport. Was there something that changed that you've seen, obviously, the evolution of you being at that gym for 17 years? And talk to me about what goes into developing and cultivating so many champions out of that environment.
We had such a strong culture when Randy was a champion, when we were in the room. And I think for me, being a young up-and-coming guy, to be able to see that and feel that vibe and feel that energy that provided the room. And then when Randy retired, we had that lull, we had that gap where, Xtreme Couture kind of fell off the map. Robert Follis came to the gym. He brought Misha Tate on board. Misha Tate ends up winning a world title. And I feel like that energy started to bring that vibe back to Xtreme Couture once again. And, when Follis passed away, unexpectedly, that was our job, I think, at the time, to kind of honor his memory was to pick up the torch and run with it, you know, and we set a standard when Follis was alive. I remember when Follis came into the room and he talked to all of us about what we want to do as a gym, as a whole. And he allowed the group to answer the question. It wasn't, this is what I want to do. This is what do you guys want to do as a team?
Leadership,
right? And what did everybody say? They wanted to be great. They wanted to be world champions. And he's like, I love it. That's what I was hoping to hear. Well, if that's what you guys want, I think these are the standards that we should set for one another. So when he passed away, the beautiful thing that I started to understand about the standard was it doesn't matter who's there. It's ours to uphold, right? So that culture shift, that standard remained the same no matter who was coming in and who was coming out. So when he passed away, I remember telling everybody in the room, like after, you know, we had that team meeting and, you know, announced that he was gone. I said, the only way we can keep his memory alive is if we keep the standard alive that he set for us. And, you know, I feel like we've done that job for him. And then we've even done it better, right? Like we far excelled those expectations that I think that he had once for us.
Stand in the standard. That's a mantra that I try and hold myself when I'm feeling lazy, when I don't want to go to the gym, when I don't want to show up to that meeting, when I'm starting to drift, just stand in the standard. Let's talk a little bit about, there's a lot of people that come into your gym, I imagine, and you've coached, trained, and been a part of a lot of different success stories over the last 17 years. What do you think separates the people that come into the gym and they have that goal, they have that vision, they want to be great? Maybe not world champion great, but I want to be great. I want to exceed in whatever that looks like, versus the people that come in and say it and actually make it happen.
You kind of just said it, man. There's the don't tell me, show me people. The people that come in and say it and kind of want you to believe what they're saying and kind of almost trying to sell it. They're the ones that never really pan out to the way that they kind of perceive, if you will. It's the don't tell me, show me guys, right? Like I don't have to beg Francis Ngannou to do extra work, or Kai Kamaka or Dan Ige. These guys are coming in and doing it, and they set a standard by example, and they don't have to peacock around and parade that, hey, look at me, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. It's simple for me when people say like, oh, I want to be a world champion. Like, what advices would you give me? And I just point over there. And I'm like, hey, look at Francis. Just watch him. Just watch his work. He's not going to tell you what he's doing, but you can see everything that he's putting in. And it's practice is over. Everybody grabs their stuff and they're ready to go home. He's doing 45 minutes extra of jump rope. And then what happens when somebody sees him doing jump rope? Dan Ige is like, oh, well, I should jump rope too. That's a champion right there. Let me follow that lead. So I think it's very important when you have guys like that to allow them to lead by example. And not only that, like give them the floor, give them the platform to be able to speak to the team, because they've done it. And that's the leadership qualities a lot of these guys have. They want to see other people come along with them.
Yeah. I feel like greatness is something that is embodied. And when you see it, it's like, why wouldn't you model it? Whether they're 100%. In the gym or in the sales room, whatever the case is. Eric, I'm really curious of this because I go back and forth with my business partners, whether it's in sales or building a family, building a team, right? We're always doing things with other people, and leadership's extremely important, and environment and culture. I'm curious, though, do you feel like great people are found or are they trained? Meaning, like, in my arena of sales, you could have someone that comes in and they have the worst attitude with inconsistent routines, but we give them the best training, the best everything, and they'll still figure out a way to not make it happen. Or you could take the worst person, the best person, put them in the best environment with the best training, and then still figure out a way to make it happen. What's your thoughts there?
I think it's a combination of both. I've seen myself in both of those lights before, and it's taken some eye-opening experiences for me to realize, oh, I have to make a change, right? Or I have to take a mental shift to be the person that I need to be for this team. But I remember hearing somebody I talked to a long time ago. He was he owned like a water, I can't remember the company. It doesn't matter. But he was a very wealthy man, and he was talking to me about how he doesn't hire resumes. He hires people. And I was always like inspired to hear that. I was like, oh, well, what was the reason for that? And he was like, if you have a good heart, you have a good work ethic, you have a good soul, you're trustworthy and all these things, I can train you to do X, Y, and Z. Right. But I also think there's a combination of being able to understand things and be competent. So there's a fine line, I think, between the two. But I've been there. I've been in the position where like I needed to be challenged to kind of push me to that next level of being a better coach and having more accountability myself, you know?
How do you win the respect of your fighters consistently? Because when you're a leader of people, whether you're in the gym or in the classroom, whatever, you need to continue to win people's respect. The second that they feel like you can't continue to give them something or take them somewhere that they can't go alone, then you lose their respect, especially in the MMA world where you're dealing with big egos, lots of craziness, very alpha mentality. How do you continue to earn that respect?
You know, I think just being there, I think that's the biggest thing is time served. It's hard to build people's trust in such a short amount of time, but when you can do things over and over and over again, and you can show your compassion, you can show your work ethic, you travel on the road and you're doing all these things. And then when you get into the firefight, like it feels like you belong there. Like it'd be so hard for me to go in the corner with somebody that I really didn't know. You're trying to get the best out of them in that moment. You're reaching, you're grabbing, but the luxury I think we have is that I've been there for so long. And I think that's the best way to gain people's trust is by your actions. And then like just the time served, just being on the mats together and working together, getting the reps, being there for the times when it's like, all right, today I'm tired, but I want to be there with this guy. I'm going to show up. I'm going to give him 100%. You know what I mean? I think that's how you really grow the trust, especially in the room at Xtreme.
Yeah, no, it's a good reminder for people. Before you ask for someone's hand, you need to touch their heart, right?
Right.
People don't care what you know until they know that you care. You need to be there for those individuals to create that level of rapport, and then you can actually serve them.
And lead by example, right? Like, dude, like be there and work and do it with enthusiasm. Like you want to be there. I can't wait for this person and cheer on their successes, right? Like I think that's another thing too that people lose sight of is I want to hear what your goals are. I want to hear what your hopes and dreams are. And I want to share it. I want to put it out there. I want to understand like, hey, what are we working to strive to become? Right. And then I'm going to be the guy that's trying to lead this train. So yeah, let's all put it out there and work together to achieve that goal.
Well said. Do you remember your first time training a champion or that first moment when someone won the belt? Who was that?
Yeah. Lance Palmer.
Lance Palmer.
That was
before I even started following.
PFL. Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. No. Yeah. 2018. He was my first champion. I actually had two guys fighting for the title that night. It was PFL. It was their inaugural season. Lance Palmer and Vinny Magalesh were both in the finals. Vinny at 205, Lance Palmer at 145. So it was kind of a crazy best of both worlds because Lance obviously won and Vinny lost. So, I had the opportunity of having two world champions in the same night, two guys getting $1 million each. And then one of them being my best friends in Vinny, who happened to lose. And I was the one that had to stop the fight because he had hurt his neck. So got him on the stool, and I knew the implications by stopping the fight and knowing that he was hurt, but knowing that like I'm taking the opportunity away from him to possibly win $1 million.
Tough.
Yeah, it was tough, man.
Who fought first?
Lance fought first.
Okay, so you got the win first and then the loss later.
Yep.
How do you manage the highs and lows in something like that?
Bro. It's so tough. It's so tough. Because, so Saturday I had 3 in a row.
Yeah.
Or no, 2 in a row, 1 in between, which was Dustin, who's a teammate of ours, but I didn't corner. So technically we had 4 Xtreme Couture guys go in a row on Saturday.
Was at the Apex.
As the Apex, right? So Mateus winning his fight, looks great, makes one small mistake, and then it's over, right? We lose. Go back, get Julian warmed up. He has a freaking fight of the night war.
Hell of a fight.
Right? So you can imagine just where my heart rate, and then we get a fight in between, which is Dustin Stolshifts, and then Myron Santos fights after that. So it's almost like a thing for me where if you come in too high, then you can actually like zap energy out of the next fighter. And if you come in too low, he feels that emotion as well. So it's like hitting a switch, man. Like you got to be able to just
even kill.
I mean, really does. So, I have some great resources like Dan Ige's dad's a Master Chief in the Navy SEALs. Have some good friends of mine that were Tier 1 operators. And I like to pick their brains in situations like this. But we're not doing it at life and death. But why not learn to train as if it was, right? So if anything, I want to learn at the highest standard possible. And I know like, hey, these fights aren't life or death, but we should at least prepare for something similar, right? For those expectations of the highs and lows when it comes to your emotions. So yeah, when you get in the back, hey, we just won. Great. It was a great knockout, but you got to hit that switch and then be able to get back in and, dial it down and be ready for the next fighter that's up.
I love it, dude. And it's such a great philosophy in life. I think too many people, obviously fighting is at the highest level of that emotional roller coaster. But I think in life, people get too high on their wins and too low on their losses, where if you can find a little bit of that stoicism,
Right.
have a little bit of that poise and that equanimity as you go through your life,
Yeah.
it's just not as emotionally draining.
Is it when you're winning, you're not as good as you think you are? When you're losing, you're not as bad?
That's it.
Right?
Yeah, it's true humility, right?
Yep.
Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less. When you're
Yes.
focused on other people, you're not too concerned about what's going on with you, and you're in full servant mode at that point.
Yeah, I remember when Francis beat Stipe and we're in the back, and that was the first thing I said to Francis and the team. I just remember I was like, well, what's next? Because it's coming after us now, right? It's like we got the targets on our back, the bullseyes on our back. And Randy always talked to us about that. He said the first title defense is the hardest fight ever of your career, because now you're the one and everybody's coming after you. Everybody's gunning for you. So, don't be complacent once you get that belt. Like, you have to go after them.
Let's talk about that a little bit. You've had multiple champions, obviously. Francis, you had Sean Strickland a couple of years ago. I believe Aljamain had a good run as well. That first title fight after winning the belt, how much of these guys deal with imposter syndrome?
I know Aljamain had a hard time because of
a unique situation.
The unique situation. He had a very hard time, but he did have a lot to prove, and I think that by doing so, he was able to shut up a lot of the critics by the second Petr Yan fight, and then what he was able to accomplish against TJ Dillashaw. So I think that moment really helped out Aljo. He became a villain in a lot of ways when he didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this poor guy was a matter of circumstance, and that's how he got the belt, but then he had to earn it, and I'm glad that he did, because I think it made him a better champion for it, And then with Sean, I don't think Sean was understanding of the type of responsibilities that he was going to have being a world champion.
Potentially one of the biggest upsets ever.
Oh, man.
That was crazy.
Him and Matt Serra, right? Like, they had to be, and like maybe Holly Holm and Ronda.
Yeah, especially after that Izzy knockout.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Crazy.
Coming off of probably the highest level of confidence he's been ever in his career.
100%.
And just to see him do that was
Yeah.
cool.
Now, I mean, so, I get that people ask all the time. They're like, which one was your favorite? And it's like, which one's your favorite kid?
Yeah, it's
you
tough.
love them all. You'll love them all, and they're all very different in numerous ways. But, for the responsibility, I think that Sean wasn't ready for with being a champion at the time. I think he was like, oh man, this brings a lot of different type of attention than I was wanting, But nonetheless, I think it was certainly one of my favorite moments to see him understand that he is good enough and like, he's a self-deprecating type of guy. And I was like, no, dude, like, you're worth it. Like, you've earned this and you deserve this. So that was a great moment to be able to see him hoist that belt up.
No, it's amazing. How much of really breaking through to the highest level, right? We're talking about the top 1% of the top 1%, UFC world champion. People would die just to be in the UFC, let alone obviously make their way up. How much of that do you think depends on skill set, their level of competence, how hard they're working, versus the belief in the identity that goes into being a champion?
It's a good question. I think it needs to be a combination of all of them, but the common denominator to me is work ethic. Over time, you started to understand, like, in the beginning times of MMA, it was like there's no such thing as overtraining. And we know that is completely opposite now. Like, especially in our sport, rest becomes the best training session at times. But now I started to realize, too, it's a lot of more of it's the mental side of things and your mental capacity of being able to handle this at the highest level with scrutiny, and people coming after you and, you're not good enough, you're this or this or this. And I think people get between their own ears more than they focus on what they need to accomplish on the mats and the training side of things. So there's a tough balance there. We're succumbed to social media now. It's something that I think, so many people, they log on and they see one negative thing and it overtakes 10 positive things they might have heard in that moment. And to me, I think that's the juggle right now, is the difference between what you actually do on the mats, how you carry yourself as a father, as a human, and then what the general public perceives of you, to me, none of that shit really even matters. But there's always this like inner struggle, this inner battle of doing all the right things and letting that other outside noise just be just that, just noise.
Yeah, it's interesting because the UFC is bigger than it's ever been. The platform is as bigger than it's ever been. So these fighters that grow up and have this desire to be the best in the world at a sport, quickly, if they achieve that, turn into celebrities.
Right.
Which come with all the negativity, the positivity as well, the fame, the fortune, but it comes with a lot of things that people probably didn't sign up for during that original commitment.
Mm-hmm. With success comes criticism. And I think that's the thing that people need to realize. We're not immune to that. And this is what we ask for. And when you understand that criticism is actually a privilege, that you're a target, like you're good enough to be targeted, that you should take pride in that. You know, not everybody wants it. I get it. I understand that. But this is what we signed up for, you know? So if we want to be the best in the world, that's going to come with criticism.
Yeah. No, it comes with the territory for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Can't have the good without the bad.
Exactly.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Francis, Sean, Aljamain, we'll talk about these three because I think most people are familiar with them that are UFC fans. Completely different people from the outside looking in. Right?
Just a tad.
Just a tad. Completely different people, completely different backgrounds, completely different probably perspectives on life, yet they've achieved something that most people aren't. What do you feel like are the common denominators between the three, that championship level?
Between the three, I would say there's a level of grit, but there's more, to me, of resiliency there. Francis probably just with the life story of never being turned back on what his hopes and dreams are. There's a hopeless romantic, I think, in like this, like, I don't care what anybody thinks, I'm going to get what I want, and I'm going to work so hard to achieve it. And with Francis, it always just felt like his destiny. You know what I mean? Like it was already written. That it was so weird for me in the Stipe fight, even in the Cyril Gane fight when it was like 2-2 going in round 5. I remember like looking at him just going like, oh dude, like we got this. Like
it's already done.
It's already done, dude. It's already been written. Like we're just gonna go out and take it now. And that, like, I was not scared in that moment. I know Dewey wasn't scared. I can feel Francis's energy. And then the reason why I say that is because looking back and you see the other corner and it was like panic, pandemonium. We can't lose. We cannot lose. Like, what are we doing? And all this stuff. And we're like, oh, dude, we got this. This is crazy. And then like with Aljo is like, oh, man, just the way he prepares for everything. He's very different in a lot of ways. He's a note taker. He's a film studier. He's very much more my style of athlete, where we will sit down and we'll have a structured practice.
High fight IQ.
High fight IQ. Dude, we watch a lot of tape together. We'll watch a lot of tape separately. We'll compare notes. What'd you see here? Look at how many times this guy did this. So in a lot of ways for me, like that fits my style of like football, where we're looking for repetitions. We're looking for sequences or this or that. And then like he'll pick up the phone and, hey, did you see this? Or did you watch Peter Yan's fight versus so-and-so? Yeah, dude, I watched it. Now, Sean doesn't want to watch tape at all. He leaves that up to us. You just tell me what you guys think. And so I always say with Sean, we coach him in spurts, because you can't overcoach Sean. He doesn't have the bandwidth for it, as you can see in the corner. In between the rounds, I literally give him like maybe 10 seconds worth of stuff, throw water at him, like holy water, like just get out of there, dude. Yeah. So all of them are very, very different in their own right. Francis is more like, I trust you, put it all together for me with a little bit more organization. So I'll run, like, I have all my notes from the Renan Fajeda camp, and he's just like, okay, cool, I like that. I'll sit down with him. Hey, here's why I want to do this. I noticed Francis is the kind of individual where he works better if you explain to him the reasons why we're doing something, so he understands it. So if I just tell him, hey, we're going to run this one body series, and you don't tell him why, he doesn't believe in it. Hey, we're going to run the one body series because we're going to negate level change. We're going to set up our overhand. Here's why we're going to do this, blah, 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 blah. Got it. Now I understand why we're doing it, right? He trusts the process, but if you can give him the reasons why and he can believe in it, then it works even better. Sean, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I think it just speaks to your ability to meet people where they're at and figure out those trigger points and how to communicate. You know, in my job, we're dealing with homeowners, we're dealing with sales reps, but you can't communicate to this person how you're going to communicate to this person. Some people like sticks, some people like carrots, some people like quality time, right? It kind of goes back to those love languages, but I think we're all different personality types. And as a communicator, as a coach, a mentor, a business leader, anything, your ability to communicate effectively to people, I think has a lot to do with your success as a mentor to them.
Helped me a lot playing quarterback as a young kid, and having my dad on the field correcting me as a quarterback a lot of times, because it was my personality to be a quarterback, and the way I'd handle things, my personality would come out in a certain brash manner, to where my dad would be like, you can't quarterback like that. You have to learn to understand that there's 10 other guys on the field, and each of them are going to have different personalities, and you're going to have to communicate with each one differently. One guy you're going to be able to grab by his face mask and he's going to respond. You do that to this kid over here and he's going to curl up and die. So understanding that, like he always said, you have to be a ball of janitor keys. You have to have the right key to open the door. That's what he always told me about when being a quarterback. Like, how do you approach them, and how do you talk to them, and how do you get the best out of them? So I think that helped me a ton, especially getting into this career.
I love it, man. So one of the most challenging parts, I imagine, or maybe not challenging, because you put in hours and hours, days and days of repetition and practice, that minute that you have in between rounds, how do you manage that minute?
It's probably the most comfortable place I've ever been in my life. There's something about it that I just love and cherish, because I know that it's a finite amount of time, right? Like, one day I'm not going to be there in that corner. So
Present.
Yeah. And it really is, man. Like, I get chills just thinking about how much I love that 1 minute of time, to make an adjustment, to try to get the best out of them in that moment. Whatever it is. And I think for me, knowing your fighter and knowing what they need to hear in that time served, like we talked about earlier, is the most important thing for me as a coach. And knowing the right thing to say in the right moment to say it in, that's where I feel like in my opinion, I feel like I'm one of the best to do it. And I think just because I love it, man. Like, I love that moment. Sometimes you're cracking a joke, sometimes you're chewing somebody out, lightening the mood. But then you have to get after them at times. So just knowing you got to be the right tool for the job in that moment, and try to get the best out of them.
Yeah, it's interesting as a fan watching, especially high-level fights, these pay-per-views where it's make or break in people's career, right? Sure. Maybe not make or break, but, in the UFC, as you start working your way up the ranking, that one fight could change the trajectory of your life. That could set you up for that title fight. That can get you in the top 5. And as we know, once you start getting to the upper echelons, life changes very quick. And it's always interesting watching and listening to the corners and noticing the body language, noticing the energy, notice how receptive the fighter is. Do you feel like most of that, because you said you're comfortable, I imagine you're in flow at that point. You've done it so many times. You have all the preparation. You have that relationship with the fighter where you can actually communicate effectively with them. Do you think that's just a reflection of how much work you guys put in outside of the fancy lights in the UFC fights? Yeah,
the reps in between, take a lot of pride in being there for sparring, take a lot of pride in trying to get those reps in. And, like Edmund Shabazi, we're getting ready for a fight, spars yesterday. I'm able to get in the corner with him for all 4 rounds. He ended up doing 5, but I did the 4 rounds with him. And then 3:30 practice, we got Manel, and he's hopefully fighting for a title here soon as well. So it's that same thing. It's like you have to get used to the guy and what he needs to hear. How does he connect? Sometimes you'll say things in practice. Like, I remember one time, with Aljo, it's like, are you even listening? But his body language feels like it's dejected, but it's like him just actually trying to find a way to breathe, stay calm, and we're like, Dan Ige is going to be looking right at you, very, very connected, right? So understanding what they're doing in that minute, because they're in a place to where they're trying to get their recovery in. So a lot of information, a lot of this might bother them in that moment. So having those sparring rounds and being there and being able to kind of read that as the practices go on helped me only really to identify what we have to do live in a fight.
People are praised in public for what they practice in private.
Right.
Tony Robbins.
Yeah, love that.
Let's talk about losing a little bit, because I think the thing that I like about MMA, UFC is it's similar to life. most of the time you're always going to lose. You could be on top of the world. You could be on a winning streak. Things could be going great in your relationship, your business. You could be on top of the world, but chances are you're going to get punched in the face eventually. Yeah. Maybe unless you're Khabib, right? Most people lose, right? Unless they get out at the right time. As the coach and the mentor and the leader of that environment at that time, you know, you're the one as well with your team that is taking the walk after that long walk after a loss. Maybe it's a title fight. Do you have a process or a system to deal with that, or is it different? How do you respond to a loss?
It's the worst, you know, and I think that's obviously a cliche thing to say. Everybody hates to lose, but what I do take pride in is don't get comfortable. Don't be okay with losing, right? Like it should hurt. It should bother you. Like you're gonna lose. I get all that stuff, but I notice guys will be at an after party or, you know, oh, I can't wait to get out. And I don't want to go anywhere. Like we just lost a title, you know, no.
Let it hurt.
Let it hurt. Like it should hurt. It should hurt. You know, you shouldn't get used to losing, you know, and to me, like I've learned to accept it. My wife doesn't really make plans unless she knows the outcome of the fight. You know, do you want to go to dinner? Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how everything goes. But I also realize that sometimes it is nice to be able to, you know, turn it off and let some of that stuff go. But I think that's what makes me the competitor that I am. And, you know, the next Monday, I just know win, lose, or draw, man. Like I'm just itching to get back in the room and right the wrongs or continue to let the train roll, you know?
Yeah. That obsessive mentality, I think, is important to have in anything, especially fighting, because I imagine as a fighter, as a coach, as a team, if you're not obsessed, there's someone else who's going to take you out.
Yep.
Talk to me a little bit about that. I think people have a misconception that being obsessed with something is negative when I don't really look at it that way. I mean, being addicted to certain things aren't necessarily well if it's using you and you're not using it. But I imagine as someone that is putting your life on the line and dedicating your career to some type of sport as violent and as challenging as this, like you need to be obsessed as a fighter and a coach.
I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're trying to get into this sport and you're doing it half-assed. I really do. Not only are you doing yourself a disservice, but your fighters and your family. You know, there was a time there that I remember, you know, my wife was just kind of like, hey, you're kind of half in, you're kind of half out, you're doing this and you're doing that. But I feel like if you just give yourself completely to this sport, and that was in 2020, and that's when I won my first Coach of the Year, right? Because I really just, you know, that burn the boats mentality. Like I'm going to give everything I got, and there's no turning back. This sport to me is super unforgiving, but it's unforgiving in a way when it knows like you're not giving your best effort. I feel like the MMA universe knows that, you know. So, and I love it. It's the most what would the word be? It's just it's trying. It gives and it takes all on the same weekend, man. It's tough.
I heard you in a podcast once said that you make the fighters start bouncing 10 seconds on the stool.
Yeah.
Walk me through that, because I love that mentality.
It's a visual cue for me in a mindset, body language thing. I learned that from Randy. Randy Couture talked to me about that, or us as a group a long time ago. Oh, man, I can't even tell you how many practices ago. This is years and years ago. Randy was fighting Mike Van Arsdale, and he tells a story where it was probably 1-1 going into round 3. And he goes, it was the most tired I've ever been on the stool. And I remember looking over and seeing Mike Van Arsdale and his body language and how tired he looked, what it was telling me. He said, I knew in that moment if I can just sit up and look like I wasn't tired, that he would mentally break. So before the clacker went off, or the seconds out went off, he goes, I just got this surge of energy. I got off the chair and I started bouncing. I looked over at him and I can see him like kind of peek over, and he makes eye contact with me, and he goes, and I just saw him just look down and melt. He said, I went out there, took him down right away, and he said, I can just feel him basically give me his neck.
Mental warfare.
Yeah. And he said, everyone's tired in that moment. Everyone has that same feeling, but if you can just sell that you're not, you can give them something different. He goes, I'm telling you, I've lived it. I experienced it. I beat somebody just by my body language alone. So for me, the X's and O's are one thing, but the space between the notes is what makes the music. and you have to be able to coach the finer details when it comes to things like that. We grapple, we go hard, make the guys get up, and make them shadow box. Well, why? So those grappling transitions, you understand when you get up, what message do you send the judges and how you look with your body language? Furthermore, what message do you send your opponent when you get up and you look more like you have more energy? So if you train it like that and we work it every day in the room, then it just becomes natural when it becomes fight night.
Those subtleties are so important,
100%.
especially at that level. I feel like at that level, everyone's tough.
Yeah.
Everyone's good. Everyone knows how to punch.
Yep.
You know, most of these guys know how to grapple at the highest level, but it's those subtleties I feel like that create the difference between winning or losing.
The optics, right? And remember, we're pandering to 3 judges, and it becomes their opinion. And how can we make it look better for our case, right? And this is no discredit to the judges. I say this with all due respect, but I joke when I say you're pandering to kindergartners, right? You want them to see the color, the sequence, the glitter, the brightness, the this, the that, right? Like you really want them to see how great your fight was. And a lot of that to me is also through your body language and what message you give off through your energy.
Yeah, it's cool kind of seeing the evolution now. You know, I don't know if it's you. It probably is you, but I hear coaches sometimes at the end of a close fight, optics screaming from the corner. That's you, right? Yeah, but it's huge, right?
Yeah.
Because the difference between you raising your hand as soon as the fight's over and you walking around with your head down could sway the judges to choosing you over them.
I've seen it. Follis used to always talk to us about that, and that the final round, the judge would usually hold on to the card and watch. There's a couple seconds to go by. And he was such a smart man when it came to these tactics. But it taught me, like, especially on the regional shows, and maybe you're not like having to head coach or you're not having to do something, but if you can sit back as a coach in the corner and just watch the other little things, you'll see things like that. And the fight will be over and the judge will be there with their scorecard, and they'll be waiting and they're looking and they're watching and they're seeing how this guy looks, and you'll see him go down and write their number down, right? Or whoever won that round. But they're taking a second to look at the body language, and they want to see how this person reacts after the fight, you know? And I think that side of things, even if you may have lost the fight, it can sway that last little, you know, bit of opinion that maybe give you the win.
Got to stack the deck.
Yeah, that's right.
When it comes to the average person, we'll pivot away from professional. When it comes to the average person that is probably not going to compete, they're probably going to go to maybe 1 or 2 MMA classes a week. What do you think is the best modality for the average person to get involved with to defend themselves, to make sure they're capable in the civilian life?
I'll try to get into all of it, to be honest with you, but definitely jiu-jitsu. I think if you're learning how to control your body, but how to, you know, isolate, how to sweep, how to defend, all those things, I think jiu-jitsu's definitely the one. Moreover, because you can dictate where the fight goes. You know, obviously wrestling, jiu-jitsu, getting the fight to the ground, nullifying something, grapple. Yeah. I prefer that. Like as a coach, you know, you get that question all the time, like what style would you prefer to have to start off with? For me, it'd probably be wrestling, just because of the grit. Guys that understand how to cut weight, then they're tough, right? I'll take a wrestler all day. I'll teach them how to punch. But if it was like my daughter or somebody that just, hey, I just want to learn, I'd definitely get them into jiu-jitsu right away. I think that would be something that's a great foundation to MMA and a good introduction into the sport.
And it gets your cardio going.
Oh, dude. And it's so much fun too. I mean, it really is when you have a good gym and a good team that, you know, like there's 9-to-5ers, right? These people aren't trying to be world champions. They also have to go to work. You know, they don't want to go to work injured. They don't want to go to work with black eyes, but they also want to be a part of something. And that's what I love so much about what we have at Xtreme, is that all these programs somehow, some way are connected to one another. And like you walk into Xtreme Couture, you feel like you're a part of those world champions, right? You feel a part of what's going on in the room. Whether you're doing beginner's jiu-jitsu class or you're at the highest level pro, we're all rubbing elbows and people feel a part of it.
100%. I heard a podcast with Taporia recently. I think it was on Joe Rogan's podcast, but it was an interesting answer. It's the first time I ever heard this. I'm curious a coach. He said that he trains a lot different than most people, and maybe I'm completely off base, but he said that most people in MMA, they train MMA, where for him, the way that he's evolved is he focused first on striking, then on jiu-jitsu, then on wrestling. What do you think of that approach?
I think it's great. I think people want to read the book as fast as possible, but forget that this is a lifelong martial art, that there's no end to this book.
It's a practice.
It's a practice. And then I think it's important to also understand that there's so much fluff. If you go and look at like the top 5 submissions in the UFC, percentage-wise, it's going to be guillotine, rear naked choke, triangle, armbar.
The
basics. That's it. Maybe Kimura. But everything else that you're learning, like, was there 3 twisters of all time, right? Leg locks, all these other things, like, use them for sweeps, use them for this, use them for situational awareness positions. But if you're focusing so much time on these other things, learn them. I think it's important. But the data is there telling you, like, hey, these 5 submissions are literally the only ones that are being hit live. So work on those 5 things on the offense and the defense. Learn and start to understand how to strike out of both stances. Don't limit yourself to orthodox or southpaw. Learn how to strike from both of those stances, but more importantly, learn how to be defensive from both of those stances, because it's not going to work if you're getting cracked when you're in one position or another. But whereas the sport evolved to now is you have to be competent out of both stances. So the growth and the evolution of this game, to me, is continuously going to grow. Now we're seeing people that come into this sport that, like these young kids that I have, Mansoor, right? This kid's never played a sport in his life. He's fought since he was a kid.
Crazy.
Right? Like when we were coming up, like, what'd you do? Football, baseball, basketball.
Maybe wrestling.
Right? Maybe you wrestled. And then you had seasons. So you're playing all these different sports. It's like these kids now. Raul Rosas, when I met him, 16 years old. What'd you do your whole life? Fought. Like, what?
Crazy.
Yeah. So it's crazy now because this generation of athletes that's coming into the UFC now, they started off in this sport and never played anything else.
It seems like just the talent coming into the Contender Series could probably
Nuts.
keep up with some of the champions from 15 years ago.
Crazy. Yeah, 100%.
When it comes to, now that you brought it up, when it comes to the evolution of the sport, where do you see MMA and the UFC going? And follow-up question to that, how do you think it blew up so much? A lot of people credit Conor McGregor. I wouldn't give him all the credit, but
I think you could put it almost in like timelines, right? Like you think Royce Gracie, and he was what got me into this sport, right? And then I kind of was inspired by watching Royce Gracie and how he was beating these bigger guys. And then my next role model was Randy. So that to me is like another timeline staple was Randy Couture. Oh, this all-American Greco wrestler who knew none of this stuff but knew how to nullify it and create his dirty boxing, create topside, we call it half mount. He doesn't call it half guard, right? His ground and pound, Mark Coleman, right? Those guys that come in and kind of revolutionize the game again. And then you have like the Ultimate Fighter era. Then you have Forrest and Stephan Bonner, who brought this whole new group of guys in that I remember friends of mine that never watched UFC at all. And I was the guy who had all the VHS tapes. And then they're like, did you see this show on Spike? And I'm like, yeah, dude, come on, man. You know, like, but that brought a lot of people in.
Yeah.
And then what happens is Ronda Rousey brings in a whole new demographic of females, right? And then you get Conor and bringing in more of the European side and the Irish side, right? So you can kind of almost look at this timeline of these individuals that really come in and help revolutionize the sport or the game. And I think it's going to continue to blossom. But more and more, like we said earlier, I think people are starting off, especially like in Dagestan, right? Like knowing these guys out there, knowing I mean, like Hamzat, Ankalaev, Islam, like these guys are starting off in diapers, wrestling bears.
Oh, yeah, monsters.
Monsters, you know? So to me, I think that's where the game's evolving to is the sport is beginning with MMA now.
Yeah, it's so cool to see because I can't really think of a big platform as the UFC that is global.
Right.
That anyone come around the world, if you dedicate yourself, most of these people, their whole life, that you can come from some third world village that doesn't have running water and become globally famous and create wealth. It's pretty crazy, the opportunity.
Yeah, 100%.
Francis Ngannou.
100%.
Yeah, it's super cool to see. I don't remember if it was the James podcast, but I did hear you talk about the infinite versus finite mindset.
Yeah.
Simon Sinek, I believe, is the book, which I love that mentality because I think in life, most people, they take the finite perspective to things. In their business, they take the finite perspective. Man, I lost this deal, or I lost this round, I lost this fight, and they get overwhelmed, versus the infinite that says, okay, I lost this, but I got a little bit better, and I'm not playing on a linear plane. I'm playing just to outlast everyone else. Talk to me about how you use that finite versus mindset fighting perspective in fighting.
It's just that, because this game doesn't have an off season, right? Yes, you win championships, but then it's like you defend it right away. 3 months later, you're defending it. For me as a coach, I just don't have there's no off button, right? So I think for me, being friends with Joe Mazzulla, for example, talked to Joe yesterday, he's gearing up for the off season, right? I got this amount of time off. He's going to come out and train with me and do all these things. And I'm just like, dude, you lucky bastard. You don't get that in this game. So the mentality for me has had shifted to the infinite mindset, because yes, you're going to lose fights, you're going to win fights, but dude, I might have 3 fights next weekend, right? It's like you got to gear back up and be ready to go and get back on the horse and have that feeling of, all right, I got to be 100% for this next fighter up, So inherently, I think it's really due to the sport that we're in. We don't really have time to stop and worry about it and whatever else, And for me, the big thing is, if you have that type of mentality, there's no end in sight, right? It's like, okay, we did this. What's next, right? Oh, I achieved this. I'm good now. No. We got more to chase. There's more things that we can do and more things we can accomplish in this sport, because it's the next man up for us.
Yeah, it never stops.
Oh, dude.
Do you have anything that you're looking forward to right now? I don't want to use the word balance because I don't like the word balance, but to some degree, when you're in a world like you are, there's no off button. But if you don't take a step back, then sometimes you can't view from an outside perspective on how to make adjustments. I call it, if I'm always in the business, I'm never going to be able to work on the business.
It's tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision.
Yep.
Is there anything right now in your life or anything that you're doing in order to create a little bit of more of that harmony from the fight game to the personal life to help you get better at the fight game?
That's a great question. I think right now for me, the balance of family is important, especially because my oldest is looking at colleges right now. It's that bittersweet because I started this journey in MMA with her on the mat in a carrier. We got pregnant when I was training, and then when Annie had McKenna, she went right back to work. So I was bringing her to them on the mats. Now I'm taking her to go look at colleges, right? So this almost time you want to hit pause and you want to slow down and you want to appreciate every moment and smell the roses, and that kind of for me has really changed my outlook a lot on this career. It really has. For me, I tell these guys too, enjoy signing the posters, man. This is something we fought for so long. You wanted to be in this position. Enjoy it, because one day it goes away. Enjoy every walk. I've been there with Martin Campman. I've been there with Gray Maynard, when I've been there for their last fights, and them not knowing that it was going to be their last fight, that last walk, that might be the last one you take, and you don't even know it at the time. So I think for me now, I'm just so appreciative of this journey that I'm on. I remind myself and I verbalize it. I say it to everyone that can hear me. Dude, there's no place I'd rather be than here with you guys today, because I know that one day it's going to be gone, and appreciate every moment of it, because just like that, that little girl that you're bringing on the mats is off to college, or that sport's over, or you don't get assigned the posters anymore.
It's so hard to do, because in your sport and in most overachievers focused on accomplishment, especially the Western mentality, it's always more and more and more, especially in your game, right? Win the championship. All right, bet. Defend the champion. Defend it again, right? Get the rubies. Right. There's always this constant more and more and more progression. Progression is what you need,
right?
Because, the wolf on the bottom of the hill is always hungrier than the wolf on top of the hill. But to have that philosophy of enjoying the moment, smell the flowers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you blend that, and how do you coach that with your fighters?
They're almost reminders to myself, honestly. And I think my wife even said something to me recently. She's like, have you taken a second to like look back and kind of see like how far you've come? Like, no. You know, like never thought of that.
I'm focused on this fight.
Yeah, like no, you're doing this. And then it will be like Randy or Mike Pyle or guys that are like colleagues of mine or mentors of mine that will say something, and it'll like remind you like, man, you've done a great job. You've busted your ass, and you take pride in that. And I think when I feel like that, I also want, like, I just wrote Danny Gay yesterday. Like, Dan's in Hawaii, and I'm watching him train a bunch of his former teammates in Hawaii, our system.
So
like,
cool.
Yeah. And I just remember, like, I'm sitting there last night and I'm seeing a story, and he's showing these guys the trace steps, something like Dan and I came up with. And he's teaching it to the degree and level of what like our standard is to pass that lineage on to somebody else. And I was like, oh man, like this is so cool. Like I'm so proud like to see you now like handing this over to somebody else, you know?
Legacy.
Yeah, the legacy of what we do, and just those reminders, man. Like I tell you, I got the best job in the world. I don't know what the hell else I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this.
So cool, dude.
Yeah.
And you're in the fight capital of the world
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Eric, this has been freaking amazing, dude. My last question for you before we time out is, if you could go back in time 17 years ago when you first walked into Xtreme Couture, you were a bartender trying to figure out your way in the world, trying to get away from the vices of Las Vegas. What advice would the Eric today, coach of multiple world champions, father, husband, what would that person tell 17 year ago, Eric?
Oh, enjoy the process, not the product. I think I was so focused on just wanting the pot or the gold pot at the end of the rainbow and just not enjoying the rainbow part of it, right? The process to get there. And that has been something for me that has shifted years ago, but it's been something that really, I think, revolutionized my career and my understanding is that's what you got to fall in love with, man, is that the 7 a.m. wake up calls, you know, going to the airport, get on the flight, the red eyes, going out and going to do battle with your best friends. And then win, lose, or draw, what we get to do is an honor. And there's not a lot of people in the world that can even do what we do. Take pride in it. Take pride in the criticism. Take pride in the you know, the good comments and the bad comments. But again, I'm grateful to be in this position, and I think that part is important, to enjoy the process all the way.
All said, dude. You're the man.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Where can people get connected? Maybe they want to learn more about MMA or Xtreme Couture.
Yeah, you know, I'm pretty much only active on Instagram. So Eric_XC MMA. And the podcast is Versus Pod. We drop an episode every Tuesday. Got a lot of good people. The Versus Pod was created because we wanted to kind of shed light on more about like the behind the scenes of MMA. A lot of relationships that we have through MMA, and you get to kind of understand the more of the personalities of the fighters and some of the people that we get to work with behind the scenes.
Love it. Guys, go follow this guy, legend in the MMA world. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
dude.
Steven. Thanks for having me, brother.
Absolutely.